welcome back to Ion Radio and Backseat Admiral. Good morning, everyone. Today is an earlier episode for me. It's 6 o'clock local time. I just have a lot going on. This is really the only time I can do it, and this also gives an opportunity for those of you that are across the planet to time in. So, if anyone's in chat and can verify that my sound is working, that would be awesome. It looks like it's working on my end, so that's good. Today is Tuesday, October 12th, and we will be discussing our Season 2, Episode 4 episode, Dodonna vs. Admiral Tarkin. Thank you guys for joining in, and glad that the sound is working. So, just a few updates for me. Finally closed on my wife's and I's new house, so we're in the process of painting and moving tons of boxes and things like that. So it is very stressful and very exciting all at the same time. But let's get back to Armada. So this game of Armada that we played is actually a really, really fun game for both of us. It was two of our new favorite commanders that faced off. What's up? It looks like James, I think also known as IrishMadCat's with us today. How's it going over on the other side of the lake? Okay, so here's our two fleets, and Ken is playing Dodonna, which has always been one of my favorite Rebel commanders. He has a great ability, great point cost where he comes in. And then I'm playing Admiral Tarkin, who is one of my favorite new Republic commanders because he's just great. He kind of does everything that old Tarkin kind of wants to do, but I think a little bit better. So let's break down... Where is this? We'll break down my fleet first. I really don't have much to change in it. So, 2 Venators, 2 Counselors. That is the fleet. So the flagship is a Venator 2 class Star Destroyer. It has Admiral Tarkin, and what you do with him is you discard a token off of him, and you get a token for all your ships. So you kind of have to plan ahead and know what commands you want to do with him, unlike other Tarkin, which you can make that decision on the fly, the Imperial version of him. But for this list, pretty much you can't go wrong with a couple navs and concentrate fires, because concentrate fires is like that piece of the puzzle that you need to make this whole list work. Actually, you need like 3 concentrate fires to make the whole list work. Okay, so then the officer is Clone Navigation Officer, and that is so that I can pass new concentrate fire tokens out if I need to, or pass navs or something to my other ships. And that's just, even though I have tons of token economy with Tarkin, it just slightly isn't enough as it is. Then we have next Clone Gunners, and Clone Gunners is a fun, if you're doing the concentrate fire command, you can discard a token at distance 1 to 5 of the enemy ship, not your ship, of their ship that has a concentrate fire token, and then you can add a blue dice set to an accuracy. So it's really good to lock down defense tokens, especially in the Clone War era. And then the Star Destroyer has Fat, and it reduces the squadron value, but it is so worth it to be able to shoot that ignition token out the side. It has thermal shields to try to stay alive, just half the dice pool before add effects come into effect. Ordinance Pods, in case you run against a squadron list, this will allow you over the course of the game to hopefully whittle down squads, and then every now and then you just throw down a flak command as well, or attack, and you should be able to like eliminate most squads, or at least scare other players that they might be more conservative with their squadrons. XI7s, and that is for the ignition attacks. So my favorite combo with SFAT is SFAT, Clone Gunners, XI7s, because you're rolling in a handful of blue dice, which is going to be pretty much straight damage, with maybe some black dice. That's just slightly longer than long range. And then Clone Gunner says, I will block your brace. And then XI7 says, I don't really care if you have redirects. You can redirect one. And crits, if they don't go off, whatever, it's still damage. So your contain's pretty much useless. And then on top of that, you can't salvo it. So Clone Gunners takes care of the only defense token that matters, which is the brace. And then the rest of the build just deals with the rest of them. So that is pretty fun. And then I have the Tranquility title on it to help keep my ship alive. So the next ship is exactly the same, except without any of the unique cards. So no Tarkin on it because you only can have one commander, and no Tranquility because there's only one Tranquility. So this is just another Venator 2 with Spat, Clone Gunners, Clone Navigator so I can pass tokens back and forth, Thermal Shields, Overload, or to overload them, can't even read, Ordinance Pods, and XI7 Turbo Lasers. The final two ships in my fleet are Counselor Chargers, and they both have linked Turbo Laser Towers. They are here for activations, and they are here to store on them a Concentrate Fire token from Tarkin, and then fly up close to try to pin ships where they are, so that my two Venators can shoot at them. And that's the list. This is already been, like, I don't have anything I want to change because I've played now the Tarkin bring some Spats for a while, because I think it's a really fun thing to play. Maybe not to play against, but it's fun to play, and I've it's one of the only fleets that I've flown, like, not against Ken, in real person against another player, and so I've had some time to tinker with it, and I'm pretty set on this is the way I like to fly it. So yeah, like, those two ships are just there to move in close so I can activate Clone Gunners, and then the other two ones are just big brawl ships, and that's what you do. You just move into the middle of the table wherever they are and you brawl, which is why the objectives I have are the objectives that I have. So let's move now into, will this kick me over to Ken's fleet? Ken's fleet. Ken has a Dodonna fleet. He has his flagship, the CR-90 Corvette B. And I understand why he brought this ship. I just don't like it. CR-90s are a little bit more survivable since 1.5. And they were already okay survivability when, you know, you were at red range. But forcing it into blue range is not where it wants to be. Especially against a fleet that has Spats, or a world that has Spats, or anything that can block the redirect. You just kind of melt right through it against bigger clusters of dice. So making it your flagship when you're kind of moving it into suicide is a little bit risky to me. I would have personally put General Dodonna on the MC-30, because MC-30s usually are like, here's one round of fighting, and then fly away. But that's me. High capacity ion turbines he has on there just to boost his dice to increase his chance of getting critical effects so that he can do Dodonna's Pride. And as much as I'm going to talk trash on this ship changed the course of the game completely when it allowed Ken to deal, I believe it's coolant discharge to one of my ships on the first turn, but we'll get to that when we talk more about the game. So that's that ship. His second ship is MC-80 Battle Cruiser, and it has Intel Officer on it, Weapon Battery Teams, XW7 Ion Batteries, XI7 Turbo Lasers, XX9 Turbo Lasers, and then Mon Karen. So for this ship, Intel Officer allows you to try to get rid of tokens, defense tokens on the other player, so you can, like, eliminate a brace early on. My sorry, I just totally blanked on what it's called. Thermal shields. Jeez. Thermal shields get around this fact because of timing issues, so I first spend thermal shields to half his dice, and then after he rolls in, he can do Intel Officer, and it doesn't go backwards to affect that. So it works for me. Weapon Battery Stack guarantees that he can turn a die with a accuracy into a side with a crit. I know people have talked about this card and they like using this card, but I'm not necessarily a big fan of this card, mainly because I usually don't need it. I would prefer on a ship like this that's going to be your main gunship gunnery teams, just so then you can shoot twice, especially with the rest of the cards that are on it. So SW7 allows you to make your accuracies just hits, like your unused accuracies, which works well if you're using Intel Officer, because sometimes you're like, okay, this turn I'll let you use your brace, I won't block it, but here's extra damage to make you really want to use it with Intel Officer, so then you get rid of it. XI7s makes redirects useless, which is what I was already talking about with my Venators, so there's that. And then XX9 turbo lasers, I really, really like with Dodana, and here's why. So Dodana needs the crit effect to go off. And a lot of people might think that the XX9 card is like great because it gives you 2 crit effects. But what's actually so nice about it is that it gives you a special crit effect. And if we talk about defense tokens, the contain token blocks standard crit effects. But the special crit effects can still take place. So what XX9 does is that it's a special. So you would have to have Damage Control Officer to be able to block XX9s. So if you get a crit with Dodana, you can use the card and it will automatically, I should always point this way, the way my screens are set up, it will allow you to bypass anyone's contain. And that's pretty cool with your Dodana because you want to get those crits off and you want to be able to look at as many cards as possible. And Moncaron says that you can only use 1 defense token. And that does look back at thermal shields if you were to activate it. So if I were to redesign this ship, I would pretty much leave it exactly the same because all of the cards do have a purpose. I would switch out weapon battery text, though, for gunnery teams. And maybe SW7 for the Ion card that allows you to reroll, because you're probably going to get up close with something and you might just want to reroll like a fighter attack or 1 dice to try to stay alive. So those are the 2 things. And then you have a Mc3 Scout. And it's pretty much the standard setup. So you have Lando, you have Ordnance Experts, and you have Assault Photon Torpedoes. You have Foresight, which I think pretty much makes Advanced Projectors a duplicate, because Foresight already allows you can choose 1 additional adjacent hull zone to suffer damage, and Advanced Projectors for 6 points is only really letting you then move 1 shield beyond that to your far side. So it does give you a little bit extra than Foresight, but together they're pretty much doing the same thing. So I would maybe switch out the defensive retrofit card for something else. This is where I would have put the commander, though, because I feel that the MC30 is more survivable than the CR90B, especially because it's going to just basically suicide in and try to get 1 or 2 crits off during the game and then explode, which is what it's meant to be. This one is meant to fly in, get a good round of attack, and then fly off, which you kind of want your ship that has your commander to fly off because you want all those chances to proc crits. Okay, so to end out his fighter build, he has Luke Skywalker, Wedge Antilles, and the entire time while we were playing, I was thinking Wedge wasn't Wedge. I was thinking he was Biggs. So I'm like, do you pass damage? And then he's like, no, it's Biggs. I'm like, oh, not Biggs. I'm like, oh, okay, Wedge. Cool. I would probably have brought Biggs. I think with all X-Wings, it might be better to, pass the damage around a little bit. Rogue Squadron and 3 X-Wings. Ken and I have discussed this build before, after, and then, now that it's been released. And he was really testing this for a different build back then. And I think he went in now and he uses Biggs instead of Wedge. But he has Wedge in there because he is... what's it called? Sorry, my brain just... One blank. He had Wedge in there because most of the time he would not be activating his own fighters. So if he just waited to the last fighter to activate in the squadron phase, then Wedge should be able to do his ability. So that was his thought process of why he brought Wedge into this list. I think he needs more to push forward with pushing squadrons. Because he really doesn't have any of these ships are very good at pushing squadrons. Let's go back and look. So 1 squadron for the Scout, 2 squadrons for the battle cruiser, and then 1 squadron for the CR-90. So none of those ships want to or should be doing squadrons. So some people were talking on our Discord actually just yesterday about how they would have brought Lancers, and I don't know if that's the answer, but at least they're rogue and they can move around and do their own thing. The reason why I wouldn't bring an X-Wing Swarm to this list is because Dodonna wants crits, and X-Wings are red dice, and red dice equal blanks for me. So I would just never be doing any damage with them, and I would never get a chance to do critical effects with Dodonna. So I would prefer using like Y-Wings or B-Wings or something that I have a higher chance of rolling a critical effect to trigger Dodonna, because this is what it is. So those are the 2 fleets. I'm going to go back to chat. If you have any questions or comments or anything, hit me up in chat right now. I'm going to bounce back and forth and answer them, and then we'll get into how the game actually turned out. Okay. Oh, congrats. Yeah, buying a house is a pain to do. We went with a big name brand bank, and if I were to redo it, I would go with a small middle mortgage person, because the bank had no incentive to actually help us. And they just kept saying, when they finally called us back, yeah, everything looks good. And we're like, but we were supposed to close like a week ago. What's the holdup? And they're like, no, everything looks good. And we're like, but we're waiting for you. Yeah, things look great. And I'm like, you guys don't know what you're doing. If we went with a smaller person, they would have been at least incentivized to help us close, and the bank did not. So that was a lot of extra stress that we didn't need, but it is done now, and it's going to be closer to our work, and it's bigger, so it's exciting. So I still probably have paint. I tried cleaning myself up. I was painting yesterday a room for the first time and cutting it in. So I'm going to finish that today. So house is exciting. What is your favorite fleet you love to use? My favorite fleets are typically fighter fleets. I really like pretty much anything that is fighter centric. So the Imperial, I like Sloan Interceptors. For Rebels, I really like bombers, Y-Wings. For the Republic, I actually really like Y-Wings as well. And then for the CIS, I like Tri-Fighters. So I'm a very fighter-centric person. Well, this is just a fun list to pull out and play, because it doesn't take much brain work, because basically you just are like, what am I going to do to this turn? Confire. How about next turn? Confire. How about the turn after that? Confire. Like, it's like you don't really need to think about the list. You just try to make sure you have a Confire token and a Confire command on everything, and then, yeah, you're good to go. The 2 smaller ships just hold on to their Confire tokens, because they're just token holders, and then they can navigate if they want, and if they're about to die, Confire. Okay, so James has a lot, so let's see what he has. Can Venator even punch without Sfat? Yeah, I know. Its dice pool is strange, like the rainbow with no rerolls isn't necessarily good. And then like the Ven 1 is like a Victory 1 Starry Story, so that's not really that good. So it kind of needs this fat to punch it all, so I would agree with that. But man, it is so good when you can line up that nice side arc with the spat and then the front arc afterwards. It's just really, really satisfying. And point defense, Ion Cannon might have been better. Been the better upgrade. Yes, I'm thinking you're talking about the Liberty in this case. Keep the CR90 alive a bit more. Oh, the CR90. Yeah, it might have been. Yeah, because then you could use evades and you could use that to force rerolls on dice. The only thing against it is, if I'm correct, I don't think my black dice were coming up with hits in this game because dice are dice. So the black dice reroll wouldn't have mattered, and rerolling a blue dice is maybe not as useful, but I'd probably roll accuracy, so it might have saved 1 damage with it. Does he need Moncarin with XI7s and XX9s and Intel Officer? It's a lot of token control. And I would mainly just be bringing Moncarin because I think all the rest of the titles for the Liberty are pretty trash. Let me look it up real fast. Start a Rebel, Liberty. So you have Liberty. If you spend a squadron token, you may activate 1 additional squadron. That may have been useful, and it's only 3 points. Endeavor at the start of the first round, gain a contained defense token. I actually like that one. That could have been useful. Monk, Calamari, Exodus Fleet, no, and then Moncarin. So, yeah, it's a lot of duplicate, like, you can't use tokens. But at the same time, I would prefer using gun routine instead of weapon expert on it, and then at least it synergizes better with that when you use a command for Confire. Both of them will work together, and I like that. Narrative. And then maybe some YT24s and then Ketsu. Yeah, that could work. Those are all good fighters for that. I really like YT24s. You can really spam them. When I was testing this fleet that I played, the Venator fleet, one of the fleets I went against was someone that brought max squads of YT2400s and Kanan, and it ate me. I almost tabled him. It was like his flagship had 1 health left on it, and it was flying, and I couldn't turn around. And then I did my flacking, and I just missed. It was just one of those frustrating things. Like, I needed 1 damage to go through to kill a squadron, so then he wouldn't have enough squadrons to kill my first Venator in range, because, you know, when you calculate the damage out. And I rolled a blank, and then I LTT'd in, and I rolled all blanks, and then I confired, and I rolled blanks, and then I did the exact same thing with my other CR90 against the same squad, and it came up with 1 damage, and I needed 2 damage to kill it, and with, like, I don't know, like 8 dice, I got 1 damage. It was bad, and then it was, like, exactly kill on the Venator, which then meant that I didn't get a turn activation for first turn the next turn, which just threw all the damage calculations out. Oh, dice. Thank you. Yeah, the house is exciting. Moncarin ties him to Confire a little bit. Might be better navigating. Yeah, that is true. The Liberties don't move very well, but I think Liberty is going to be more of your anchor ship in this fleet, and the other 2 ships are flying around it. Okay, so let's now look at objectives. So I chose first player. No, I was second player. Should have been first. And I gave Ken these options. So surprise attack, contested outpost, and solar corona. And so the idea with my fleet is surprise attack. Like always, I get to choose where your flagship is. I get to put my Venators, and I get to put ignition tokens out to try to kill you as fast as possible. Contested outpost says my Venators sit right here, and they stay sitting there, and they'll earn me points, and then you have to come into this death field of ignition tokens. Solar Corona says you put your entire fleet down, and then I can decide on how I want to approach you. So Ken chose surprise attack, and he thought that it would probably be his best option. What it allowed me to do is use navigate, because all of his ships want to navigate. Like the MC30 wants to navigate, the CR90B wants to navigate, and his lib for the most part, it's a janky ship, so it wants to navigate. And then I threw a Confire in there to block down like extra dice being added and like Moncarin being triggered. So that's how I would do surprise attack there. So let's look at the picture of the deployment. So you can see here, my deployment goes really fast. He has to deploy his flagship touching the station, which I put right here, and then I put other obstacles around it so that it's annoying to try to fly through, kind of limiting where his ships could be. Then my ship's plan is to just fly forward, kill his flagship, and then sweep across the board through the middle, spatting out the side and killing him. And then my CR90s are here because they're going to fly and try to pin these two ships into where my meat grinder or Venators are going to be, and then they'll be close enough to use clone gunners when I have a token on it. Ken's deployment is his CR90 here with his flagship, and then his fighters deployed around it. Then he has the Liberty, and he has the MC30, so that's just a repeat shot. And then you look, this is how I came in, exactly how I said. So my CR90s are here to pin and throw some long-range damage, and then be close enough to use that. My Venators sweep around, and they're going to focus fire in on this region and try to kill the flagship and then kill the Liberty next. And of course, Ken being first player gets to activate first, and he uses Dodonna, and I knew this is going to happen, so I was like bracing for it, and I think I edited most of it out, but it was one of those things I'm just looking at the card as I'm handing them, and I'm trying to decide if I want to salvo or not, because I know, like, I want to salvo, because why wouldn't you? And I'm like, you know, I've been reading way too much about the question of coolant discharge against salvoing ships and things like that, and it's going to negatively affect me, and I decided not to. So let's pull up real fast what that is for those of you that don't know. So this is the official ruling from Atomic Mass Games, and this gentleman, Darth Vader, asks, coolant discharge, only one attack you perform each round can target a ship. So if your unactivated ship performs a salvo, then gets coolant discharge later in the round, does that damage card prevent the ship from attacking ships during the activation later in the round? In other words, does the damage card look backwards? We've already talked about it in this discussion that cards really don't look backwards. And then 2, if your unactivated ship spends a salvo defense token during your opponent's attack, then receive a coolant discharge damage card from the opponent's ships in the same attack, then your ship performs its salvo attack. Is your ship prevented from attacking ships during the activation later in the round? So the answer to that is, if you salvo and then later on get the card, then it doesn't prevent you because it doesn't look backwards. But if, because of the timing windows, I do all my defense tokens, then criticals take effect, and then salvo. If I were to spend the salvo and get coolant discharge, then I'm locked out and I won't be able to attack the rest of the turn. So that is the ruling with that. So I chose not to use salvo, which is a good thing, because then I could still make my ignition attack. But really, this is the one point in the game that it changes everything the most. Because if I didn't get that critical, if Ken gave me anything else, I'm pretty sure I would have tabled him turn 4. Because it completely messed up all my plans, and my Venator was pretty much useless. I was really good this game at getting that Venator specifically into double arcs. Like, I know it's hard for this angle, but we're double arced into this Liberty here. So this ship could theoretically move in and kill the flagship, and then these guys could finish it off. And then this ship could just start pounding into the Liberty and eliminate it quickly. And then they could switch over to the MC30. And instead of that, I only got one attack. And with Ignition Token, Ken used that to his advantage to maneuver his ships, so then he was out of arc or in arc, depending on what he wanted me to shoot at. Because I only could shoot once, and I have to do Ignition first. And there's like no reason not to Ignition. The first time I did Ignition, again, I put it in the wrong spot. I put it in my front arc. If I put it out my side, I could have killed the Liberty. But this is why we're doing this. This is why we're looking backwards at the game to talk about things like that. So you can see here, the next turn, my ignition token from this ship is right here, which is in my front arc. But I have enough ships that I could theoretically slow him down and try to make him jump over here. So he probably just reverse how he did it, but it is what it is. But I only get one attack, and I have to make this attack here. He's able to kill me, and because he's able to kill specifically this ship, he's able to jump his ship over here, and now he's in my side arc, which I can't take because I only can attack one ship. And because of the way the turns are, like, even if I switched to an engineering to try to get rid of the card, it wouldn't have mattered because it would be so far down the food chain of doing it, because I start with 3 and then I have a 4th already after turn 1, and I got the crit on turn 2, so the earliest I could get a engineering token theoretically in would be turn 5, which I can't do. And at that point I'm like, I'm just going to commit to what I'm doing anyway, because it's either he's going to escape out of me or I'm going to kill him. There's just no way or time to do that. So this is where his ships land, and this ship is kind of out of the fight because of the turn it took, and then this ship just kept like ramming and staying exactly where it was to try to get shots on, and I think that's it. So I usually don't go into damage, but I think it's important for this game to talk about it. So turn 1 of damage for Ken, turn 2, into turn 2, or however, into turn 1 or 2. So the CR-90's dead, the battlecruiser's extremely wounded, and the scout's wounded. And then we go into, look at this, the battlecruiser has 1 health. All I need is another attack to go into it. Just one more attack, or one more dice to be in my favor. And the scout's already really, really wounded. And then you look, here's another turn of 2 of his ships are on 1 health. And then at the end of the game, he used an engineering, so he got 1 back. But like, there's like 3+ turns that all of his ships are at 1 health, and I was just not able to capitalize. And that's mainly due to the coolant discharge that Dodonna gave me before I destroyed the CR-90, which is frustrating. But that card that he gave me changed the course of the game, because I'm pretty sure, like, if you look at where... I'll close that one. That one. If you look at how many times I have him in this front arc and possibly side arc, I should be able to get enough damage through with the SFAT and my front arc. Or look at this, this is another double arc. Like, there's enough chances that I could do enough damage to him, and I was just prevented to do it. So that's where Dodonna comes in, when you can just hand someone a critical effect that ruins the way that their cards interact, and that's what happened in this game. So let's go final score. So final score, Ken took out a Charger. I took out a couple of his squadrons and the CR-90, and then the rest of his fleet limped it away. Ending the game at 52 points for Ken, 119 for me, MOV of 67, and it's a 4-7. So, but it was so close to a table. But that's the problem when you don't have like fighters that you can send off to get 1 extra damage, or you have the ships. You're just a ship-based thing. I could probably have focused a little bit more on flacking and kill a bit more squatters, but I wouldn't be able to kill enough probably of his fighters to move it into an 8-3. I really just needed to knock out that MC, both MCs. So that's kind of my take on the game. If you have any questions, ask them in chat. I'll go back and look at chat now and discuss anything that you guys want to talk about. So, not that much has been posted since. I usually play those most times. Great objective selection. I know, it's like really just my standard objective selection. I know I haven't been doing a lot of strategy videos, or strategy specific intros to this video. I have a objective one in the process of making. I need to get my stuff back out so I can take some pictures for you guys so that it's more visual. But I have like a TED Talk of my objective thought process that I'm working on. Stupid moving and work and life get in the way of doing a lot of that, but that's in the process. It's been kind of scripted out just so I have all my talking points in a row, so it's just not me rambling as much as I ramble in this. I just need to take pictures and get Ken to make me some slides that will go with it, but that's going to be a really good one because it's going to go through pretty much my exact how I select objectives for the game, and then how I select, when I'm first player, the objective of the opponent to play. So that's coming, but it'll probably be close. Maybe we'll end the season episode 10 special, and then episode 10 Backseat Admiral special. Hopefully by then life has calmed down a little bit and I can get to those things. Going to be rough. I heard navs are really good for moving. Yes, they are. So my hierarchy, a lot of times, if your build's not specifically like for large spaceships, I've said it before, that if your build's not specifically designed to use concentrate fire in 1.5, which it changed from 1, like gunnery teams and all those type of cards didn't need concentrate fire, but now they do. So now concentrate fire's moved up on the totem pole of important commands to do. Before it was just, I would just straight navigate or squadron if I was a squadron build, because it is more important to be able to get your main arc into line of sight and into arc of the enemy than it is to throw in 1 extra dice. Now that equation has changed a little bit with gunnery teams. Like I can now throw dice at more things, or Mon Carin that requires it. Like I can block something. So the concentrate fire command is more useful. So it's now more competitive with navigate, but I still think navigate for the most part is one of the best commands. Are there any objectives you haven't played? I think so, just because sometimes objectives are bad. Let me look through the list real fast and I'll tell you. So red objectives: advanced gunnery, blockade run, close intel scan, ion storm, mark for destruction, most wanted, opening salvo, precision, rift ambush, station, surprise. No, I've played every single red objective. Blue objective, or yellow objectives next. Asteroid tactics, play that a lot. VIP, contested outpost, fighter ambush, fighter lanes, fleet ambush, fleet and bean, hyperspace assault, jamming barrier, planetary, rift. So I've played all of the yellow as well. Now let's move on to blue. Blue are a little bit dicey. It's either you really, really want a blue objective or you don't want to touch it at all. So this one I might not have one that I've played. So dangerous territory, doom station, hyperspace migration. I don't know if I've actually played hyperspace migration. That's the one that the Exorgoths, I think, are moving across the table, or Purgles are moving across the table. I don't think I've played that one. That might be one of the only objectives that I haven't played, hyperspace migration. Infested fields, yes. Intel, minefields, navigational hazards, salvage run, sensor net, solar corona. Yeah, so I've played all the objectives except for one, which is hyperspace migration. So maybe I just start building fleets around that just to see if Ken will ever pick it. But the problem with that is, like, you kind of need a fleet built for it, and then people aren't going to want to pick it, which is probably why I've never picked it. And there's like a lot of text and extra rules, so usually where I would run into this would be during a tournament, and because I've never played it, I'm not going to make it the first time I play it during a tournament against a player that intentionally brought it, because then you have this learning curve at something that is already stressful and a long day, and I'm not going to suffer through that. I would just pick something else. Especially because you can earn a lot of tokens from it. I know that in the hypothetical reading through it and how to use it. But, yeah, that is probably the only objective that I have never played a game of. I just realized, how can Rebels or Empire defeat Clone War era ships? Corey, if you don't mind elaborating a little bit more on your question, I just realized, how can Rebel or Empires defeat Clone Wars era ships? And it's just, you have to play to your strength. So each faction has its strengths. And I think it's interesting that people say that the CIS and the Clone Wars need more to be a full faction, but then at the same time people say that they're a better faction, because if they were a better faction then they wouldn't need more. They're a very good faction, and they are, for how few releases they have, they're in a very good, healthy spot. But I think that was intentional for the game. And you just maximize your thing. It's still Sloane going up against anything besides like a Luminara fleet for the Republic. She'll wipe them. And as much as I hate it, like, Onagers are really good against the Clone Wars factions because most of their ships are slow or can't maneuver properly. Which I'm not saying the answer is to use Onagers, but they exist, sadly, in the game, and they're really good against the clone factions. But Star Destroyers are still Star Destroyers, even with thermal shields. It's a struggle when I play Rebels or Empire. I always get defeated by Clone Wars ships. So you just have to think about the game a bit differently. So before like thermal shields and things like that, you would have one big punch. You would build a Star Destroyer, and it would be like all-in Star Destroyering, and that's what you did. And now with the way the defense tokens work and other upgrade cards like thermal shields, that one big punch is going to get nerfed. So add dice effects are better than necessarily reroll in that case. So you just have to start changing the way you think about and build fleets to maximize what it is. So the Empire now, instead of just punching through and ignoring your defense tokens with like boarding troopers and Avenger, they're going to need to deal with your defense tokens and try to overload them. Because overloading defense tokens was more of a Rebel thing versus the Empire than it was the Empire versus the Rebels, when those were the two factions out there. But the GAR and the CIS are both extremely good at overloading defense tokens, specifically with salvo. So they are very good at doing that. So you have to then try to make it so that, like, I take actually a lot of obstructed shots intentionally against salvo ships so that they don't get enough firepower back. And I'm trying to think, what was it? Was it our last episode? Give me one sec. One of our last episodes, I think I did that. That's 2 verse 3. So yeah, actually it's an episode coming up. I always talk about episodes right before they come out. I think it's the next episode. But I'll take obstructed shots against a ship with salvo, knowing that it will block. I lose a dice, but you don't get a salvo, and that's to not overheat my defense tokens before you get to attack me. So you just have to like change the way you really look at damage and defense token calculations as they go out, which is why it's like extra frustrating when you're like, for me playing Ken specifically, like, so I'm figuring out like your ship can potentially do X amount of damage, and then I would have these defense tokens to deal with that, which then would mean that I would have these defense tokens to still deal with other attacks. And then Ken's like, here's a red dice for a double on a salvo, and then I'm going to re-roll it into a double, and you're like, oh, so I planned on you rolling a double the first time, and then I have a way to make you re-roll it, and then you roll into a double again, and you're like, well, 2 damage is not on my list of things I want to deal with this, because that's just a free attack of 2 damage, and I'm going to have to let it go because I'm not going to be able, I don't want to brace it because I need my brace for later on. I don't want to redirect it, so I'm just going to eat 2 damage, and that kind of sucks. Okay, so I could keep rambling about that all day. But it's really, to summarize your question, you just have to change the way you think about it, and you have to think about what each faction's good at and just lean into that, and then think about what other factions are good at, and then try to make it so that that player can't do that. Yeah, salvo being part of the Republic and CIS makes it very difficult for the rebels and the Imperial to deal with it, but you just have to change, like, you have to like double hit ships so that they force their hand in spending the brace out, or they just eat damage. Like, you know, hit someone with a Star Destroyer so they spend the thermal shields, and then hit them with demo or a beefed up Arcaten afterwards, so they want to discard it, or vice versa. So you just need to learn how to overheat defense tokens differently. So Harkrack asks, are you going to see a narrative or campaign style season? You mentioned you would modify the available campaigns rule sets if you were to do it again. Yeah, we would change it. So a lot of that also comes from views, like as a channel. We have to like plan for things for the channel, and campaigns do not perform well. And I think that has a lot to do with the way YouTube itself works, so like algorithm-wise. And so for most people, they just want to sit down and they want to watch one thing. They don't necessarily want to watch a series of things that require them to watch things in a certain order, which is one of the reasons why we switched to a season, because you could jump into any season at any point and it doesn't matter, and our numbers don't go crazy high. So if you like watch YouTube videos on making YouTube videos, you'll learn that for the most part, YouTube does not like you numbering your things. So like we were up at like episode 44, I think is what it was. And so YouTube doesn't like that, because in the algorithm, it wants to give you things in order or just one-offs. So switching to a season method means that we can just make seasons and then our numbers reset, so then YouTube doesn't hate us. But the problem with the campaign is, so let's say an average video of ours that we release is this big. Well, a campaign is automatically going to be less than that. And the longer the campaign is, each video itself gets less and less views. That's what we've noticed with both of our campaigns. And it's hard then to dedicate that much time into making a campaign that you're not going to get the views back on. And it's like, if I'm only getting like 200 views versus, 11 to 1200 views on a video, and the videos take the exact same amount of time, and the campaign actually takes more time because there's a lot of extra thinking in the background, it just makes it hard to film. Ken and I will probably eventually do another narrative style campaign. Like, we're hopefully one day going to be able to tie like Legion and Armada together. But we need to get Legion off the ground because we both have a lot of painting and things to do before we can do that. And then Armada needs to be at a point that we can take a break and then combine the two into a sandwich, a juicy Armada Legion sandwich. That's what we're hoping to do, but that's going to be a bit down the road. So I've been rambling on now for 50 minutes. So if you guys have any final thoughts or final questions, go ahead and throw them in. I'm probably going to start wrapping it all up. Like normal, I'm going to give a little bit of spoiler for this next coming week, which is only in like 3 days now, because this is a little bit later than normal for our thing. And so next week, we get Ken using TF 1726, and I'm going to a very fun list for the Empire, which is Mati. So get a little bit of extra health, and he gets extra black dice. So it'll be very interesting to see how that match goes out. For those of you that are Patreon members, you'll get early access to that tomorrow. Ken will send out a spoiler image so you guys can see our fleets and start speculating on how it goes. And then that video will be released on Friday. So let's see. It looks like another question. What do you think of playing campaign objectives in regular matches? So the problem with doing campaign objectives in regular matches is that you will know what the objective is first, so like if you know what the objective is beforehand, you can just straight up build a fleet based off of that. Like campaigns, like I choose this and then I'm going to play here, at least there's a little bit of surprise in it. But if you're just to play the campaign objectives, you already know what it is, and then it becomes like, do you just roll off to see who's first or second player, because those objectives are like strongly curved toward one player or the other, more so than any of the objectives. Like the objectives normally like help second player and are okay, but this like strongly helps a certain player, and that's something to be aware of when playing those. You can like just with a friend be like, let's play all of the green objectives and go for it, or add in a green objective, but they are way stronger typically, or more difficult to pull off than standard objectives. Good to know about the ideas of focusing on strengths and weaknesses on factions. I hope we get to play TTS eventually. That will probably be against Ken. I have never used any of the online games. One day, the big dream will be able to pull people in real life when the world resumes back to normal-ish. Maybe in the IN Open, that's something that Ken and I have always talked about, but with restrictions for most people in the world and virus spreading, we just can't in good conscience throw down a tournament that we're sponsoring right now with the way the world is. But one day, we'll have everyone here. And then, hey, we could probably even live stream it. That would be a lot of fun. We'd probably do a 2-day event. Like an actual tournament than something more just fun that like people more interactive with Ken and I than Ken and I running something. So we have a lot of ideas. It's just hasn't panned out yet. Okay, well, I think I'm going to call the video there. I'm going to go eat breakfast then, and I'm going to load up a lot of boxes and do a lot of painting and things like that today. So I hope everyone's day goes well. Thank you for everyone that has joined me today, and thank you for watching if you're watching this afterwards. Let me know how you like it posted. Do you like early mornings? Do you like evenings? What works best? I'll probably throw a poll up eventually on our Discord. Speaking of Discord, if you're not a member, join it. There's a lot of cool people on it, and you can talk to Ken and I directly. And he was earlier in the chat. I don't know if he's still there, but IrishMadCat also has a spot, and he posts all of his battles that he does online there, and it's good. He does like kind of like almost like what I end up doing. Like he just posts pictures of the rounds and like make comments on certain good or bad dice rolls. Usually bad. Like he sometimes says poor luck like me with rolls, and you can interact with him as well. So thank you very much for watching. This is Backseat Admiral, and you have been watching Ion Radio.